Shalom, shalom. Brotherly Yasha come. Service of Zion. Lord willing back with another edifying lesson to the Holy Spirit. Before I begin, I want to give all honor and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Hakwadash, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well and teach sound doctrine. And a strong shalom to the hopeful elect, the sincere Akim laboring. And today, as you can see by the title, I'll be going into Alexander the Great. I'll be going over the article that Elder Apostle Ramab used and a couple sources of my own. And Lord willing, the elect is edified. So without further ado, let's go to this article. Let me breeze through this and get some precepts. Background. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the city of Pella, the ancient capital of Macedonia. His parents were Philip II and Olympias of Epirus, or Epirus. It says from his father, Alexander learned the art and science of warfare, but historians agree that his mother was far more influential in his life. From her, Alexander inherited a profound love for learning and also his fiery, sometimes ruthless nature. During his early years, Alexander's mother constantly told him that he was part god. Her family had long claimed to be descendants of Achilles, the demigod, so she told him that this meant some divine blood was pumping through his veins. Of course, that's all nonsense, right? Achilles was a myth, and Alexander was a mortal man like any other, but it's important because of the profound effect these stories had on Alexander. He believed he was the descendant of Achilles, which prompted Alexander to study all that he could about the demigod. In his adult years, Alexander even carried with him a copy of Homer's Iliad, which chronicles Achilles' conquest. Every night, he slept with this book under his pillow. He carried it with him into every battle. When Alexander was young, he was personally taught by Aristotle, and through the spirit, Aristotle was a Jake. It says among the subjects Aristotle taught him was the Hebrew language. So Alexander the Great knew the ancient Paleo-Hebrew. It says in 336, when Alexander was 20 years old, his father was assassinated. And this is important as we read and get more history because his father had mapped out a lot of the conquest, but through the Holy Spirit, it wasn't up to him to take down the neighboring empires. It was up to Alexander the Great. Continuing on, it says Alexander ascended the throne of Macedonia and took command of the massive army his father had spent his life assembling and training. Campaigns of conquest. Also, immediately after ascending the throne, Alexander embarked on the great military crusade that his father had spent years preparing for, the conquest of the Persian Empire. And all these things are described in the book of Daniel. It says, for several generations before Alexander, the Persian Empire had dominated much of the known world, including some Greek cities. Many in Greece and Macedonia felt that it threatened the very existence of the Greek way of life. Just before entering into Asia Minor to wage the campaign, Alexander's mother pulled him aside and told him that his true father was not Philip, but none other than Zeus, the king of the Greek pantheon. So, in addition to prophecy, his mindset was that he was untouchable because he was like a literal half man, half God. It says she had always told him that he was the descendant of Achilles, but now she took this delusion a massive step further. It was the last time Alexander would see his homeland and his mother. He entered Asia Minor, and the first city he conquered was Baalbek, which he renamed Heliopolis. Then he liberated Ephesus from Persian rule. Then Alexander defeated the Persian army's main force at the Battle of Issus. Next, he sacked the cities of Sidon and Aleppo, and then conquered the rest of Syria and then Egypt. Things were going well for Alexander. He would have been about 24 years old and was undefeated. Every single battle was a victory for him. He felt invincible. He felt that his victories were proof that his mother had always been right. He would have felt like he was really a god. It was around that time that Alexander set his sights on Jerusalem. And this is really the main part of the article. It says, Alexander, these ancient prophecies are about you. And that's the point of this lesson, linking prophecy and secular history. It says Josephus or Josephus Salakian, the Jewish historian who lived in the first century AD, said that when Alexander was just about to enter the city of Jerusalem, the Jewish high priest at the time, a man named Jaddua, met him on the outskirts of the city. Jaddua led a procession of affluent residents of Jerusalem. They hoped that by walking out to meet this mighty warrior, they might keep Jerusalem from being destroyed by his army. The sight of the high priest and the procession gave Alexander pause. He entered the city peacefully. Once inside, Jaddua brought Alexander to the temple and showed him some passages in the book of Daniel. God had inspired the prophet Daniel to write his book back in 535 BC, about 180 years before Alexander was born. Right, showing that nothing can go against prophecy, because if the Lord ordained it, it's going to happen. It says we know that because of Daniel chapter 10 verse 1, in which Daniel says he wrote in the third year of the reign of Cyrus the Great. As a matter of fact, let's go to that real quick. Got my sword right here. It says Daniel chapter 10 verse 1. In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the time appointed was long, and he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. So the understanding of the thing was Alexander the Great coming to the power that he had during the Greek Empire, Slovakia. Slovakia. It says historians agree that would have been around 535 BC. Jaddua would have shown Alexander such passages as Daniel 11:2 and 3, which discuss the Persian Empire pushing against Greece and eventually being conquered by a mighty Greek king. And let's go to that too. Go to that in the blue letter. Daniel chapter 11. And I'll start at the top. Also, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. So this is talking about how Alexander the Great is going to come into power, and when he dies, it's not going to go to, you know, his seed, his lineage. It's going to be split up between his four generals. Continuing on in the article, it says, "Behold, there shall stand up yet three kings in Persia." Well, we just read that. We can keep going. It says, Jadua would also likely have shown him companion passages in Daniel 8, which give more details about this mighty king of Greece who would defeat the Persian Empire. These passages truly are about Alexander the Great, and they were written around 200 years before his reign began, right? Proving that nothing can stand against prophecy, against Yahweh Shem Yahushai. It says, you can imagine Alexander the Great standing in the temple next to the high priest. You can imagine him being shown an ancient scroll with the words of Daniel written on it. Thanks to the education he had received from Aristotle, Alexander could read the Hebrew words Daniel had written. He needed no translation. He had also been told by his mother his whole life that he was no ordinary man, but someone with divine blood coursing through his veins. This passage in Daniel, of course, did not say he was divine in any way, but Jadua would have told Alexander that the book had the true power's fingerprints all over it. We don't know all the details. We can only speculate about Alexander's thought process, but it may be the fact that his mother had always told him he was of divine origin. Like it. It says that the fact that his mother had always told him he was of divine origin made him more open to believing these ancient holy scriptures were about him. Or maybe he was just compelled by the direct language about a mighty king from Greece overthrowing the Persian Empire, especially since he had already made progress toward the end. Whatever the reason, Alexander the Great believed that he himself was the man being discussed in these passages. He believed that it was a true prophecy and that he himself was in the process of fulfilling it. Josephus wrote about Alexander's reaction to Judea in Antiquities of the Jews, book 11, chapter 8, section 5. So yeah, Prophet Daniel definitely spoke about Alexander the Great before he hit the scene, and those were all things revealed to him by the Holy Spirit. Like how about Shemi Sorry. Fuck it. I'm on those real quick. Um, I'll jump straight to the point. Daniel chapter 7, verse 6. It says, "And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard." As a matter of fact, to provide context, I'll start at the top. Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told us some of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. The four winds represent the four kingdoms: the Babylonian, Assyrian, the Greek, and the Roman. Verse 3, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Now I'll jump straight to the point. Daniel chapter 7, verse 6 says, after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast had also four heads, and dominion was given to it. That leopard represents Alexander the Greek and the Greek Empire. The four wings represent his four generals. And his four generals are Cassander, Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Seleucus. Let's go to Daniel 8. So this is another prediction. And real quick, go to this other source. So, see, this is a leopard. This is what he used to do during his reign. I don't know if you can see that, but he would put animal coats on his head, and a leopard is fierce. He was a fierce warrior. That was the spirit put on him by Yahweh Shem Yahushua. This is the Harper Collins Bible Dictionary. And Lord willing, I'll be coming back to this. So when Daniel was learning about this, he believed it to be true, and because it is. Daniel chapter 8, and I'll start at the verse top. I'll start at the first one again to provide context. It says, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw it, that I was in Shushan, in the palace which is in the province of Elon, and I saw a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. We're gonna look at the one over here. Not a good map. Elam right here. So at the time, he would have been right here. He said, Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So this is referring, let's go back to Daniel 7 real quick, because that's talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, and between the two, the Persian Empire was stronger. Fuck it, let me get my soup. Matter of fact, let's go back to Daniel 8. Matter of fact, I'm gonna read from this Harper's Dictionary again. This is page 22, excerpt on Alexander. Alexander the Third, known as Alexander the Great, one of the greatest leaders of all time. He succeeded to the throne in 336 BC as king of Macedonia or Macedon, and the Greek city-states conquered by his father Philip II. In 334, Alex began the conquest of the Persian Empire in the east. The first phase of his conquest occupied the period from 334 BC to 330 BC, during which time the Persian king Darius III was still alive and able to offer resistance to Alexander. During the first years of this campaign, Alexander marched through Anatolia, Phoenicia, Palestine, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. Through Greek naval fleet, though the Greek naval fleet had been disbanded in 334 BC, Alexander was able to neutralize the Persian navy by controlling its bases. In 331, the oracle of Amun-Re in Egypt proclaimed Alexander divine. And as we read, he's not. All the powers given to him were through Habashim Yoshai. It said at some point Alexander may even demanded that he be paid divine honors. But he had mercy on Israel because they was been taxed heavy and had to pay tribute, but Israel didn't have to pay as much. And at some point, Alexander may even have demanded that he be paid divine honors. In April of 331, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria on the western edge of Egypt's Nile Delta. Alexander was able to obtain wealth from captured Persian capitals. He burnt Persepolis in 330, and in July of that year, Darius was murdered. Alexander concluded this phase of his conquest by disbanding his Greek allies. The second phase involved putting down nationalist uprisings in the empire. It saw an increasing orientalization of the court and Alexander's marriage to the Bactrian princess Roxanne. During this period, a number of cities called Alexandria were founded throughout the empire. It says in 327 BC, Alexander undertook his famous march through Afghanistan into India. His eastward progress was stopped when the troop refused to go any further. He marched down the Indus River, but plans to coordinate the army and fleet fell through when the ships were delayed by monsoons. Only 25% of the army survived the western crossing of the Gadrosian Desert, southern coast of modern Iran and Pakistan. Upon his return, Alexander removed officials whose loyalty had proved questionable while he was in India. The final 18 months brought the disbanding of Alexander's Macedonian veterans. The army and the court were increasingly staffed by Iranians. Alexander ordered the reparation Slovakia of the repatriation of Greek exiles in the empire. It says he appears to have come to insist on being paid divine honors by having those entering his presence prostrate themselves. Finally, while preparing for a campaign into Arabia, Alexander died on June 10th, 323. His body was a prize at the funeral games and was won by Ptolemy I, who took it to Egypt. Right, so like I brought out earlier, you know, Ptolemy was one of his generals. Proving that this was real, that's two sources: the article, the book, and then I have one more. It says, though he retained the Persian administrative system of satrapies, Alexander established garrisons and Greek-style cities throughout the area, which led to an orientalized Greek culture among the educated of the entire region. The Hellenistic period, 300 BC to 300 AD, that resulted and saw Greek culture dominate the greater Mediterranean basin, owes its impetus to Alexander's victories, and it began with his death. So it started with the tributes, and then, during that period, Hellenization was at an all-time high. And that's why they want the Apocrypha out of the Bible, because that explains that when they said in the New Testament, Jew nor Greek, or Jew and Gentile. Because it was at this time in particular, now that we're on the topic, that, like the scriptures say, we learned the ways of our oppressors. It says, the Hellenistic period, 300 BC to 300 AD, that resulted and saw Greek culture dominate the greater Mediterranean basin or basin, owes its impetus to Alexander's victories, and it began with his death. The results of that dominance by Greek culture, and especially the Greek language, led to the translation of the Old Testament in Greek and to the writing of the New Testament in the same language. Disputes over the degree to which Greek culture might be admitted into Jewish life also led to disputes between those who favored its adoption and those who opposed it altogether. So yeah, that was a lot of information, but it's all backed up by the scriptures. Daniel 8:1, because this was the last king before Alexander the Great. Oh, Salakia. That was the last king of that particular empire. Salakia. Says in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that it was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. So we saw that on the map. Verse 4, jump down. As a matter of fact, no, Salaki, verse 3, it says, Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns. That ram represents, we'll read it a little further down the line, but that's the Medio Persian Empire. It says, a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So that's why those empires were combined. But, eventually the Persian Empire proved to be stronger. Verse 4, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and south, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. So when it's talking about west, north, and south, it's about completely expanding and conquering the other nations, the surrounding nations. Verse 5, and I was considering, behold, and he go from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn. So this goat is talking about Alexander the Great. It says, and touched not the ground, because, the divine power given to him by Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, not from Achilles, not from Zeus, allow him to conquer these nations with ease, because it was his turn. Let's go to that in the Hebrew.
Strong's H 2380. Chazuf. Chazuf.
It says vision, conspicuousness, vision, oracle of a prophet, agreement, conspicuousness, and appearance. So the notable power that he had, that horn represents power. That was divine prophecy. So the power that he received because of the prophecies allow him to breeze through these other nations into conquest. And just like we read in the Harper's Bible Dictionary, you know, supposedly his father had planned the conquest for years, but ultimately it was the plan of Yahweh Shem Yahushai for those plans to be executed through Alexander the Great. Let's jump down to 20. It says, the ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And right, it says the last one will be stronger. The Persian Empire is the empire that got dominated right before Alexander the Great came to power. Daniel 8:21. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So, right, like we mentioned in Daniel chapter 7, that leopard represents Greece and Alexander. I read 21 again, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So that great horn, that power that was prophesied to be given unto Daniel. Salakia, Alexander. Uh, None of these straight up mention his name until we get to the book of Maccabees. So like I'm missing something. So like, yeah. And before I go to that Maccabees, I want to go to that dictionary again, get the definition of apocrypha. Shalom to everybody watching. This is page 39 in the Harper's Dictionary. It's Apocrypha, Old Testament, a group of books or part of books, not a part of the Jewish canon of the Hebrew Scriptures, but found in early Christian versions of the Old Testament. Apocrypha is from the Greek for concealed or hidden. 2nd Ezra 12, 37, 38, and 14 to 45, 46. It says, although in current Christian usage, it has the sense of set aside or withdrawn from full can- canonical status as scripture. The Christian scholar Jerome labeled most of those books as apocryphal and did not include them in his translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, during the Reformation. Protestants gathered the books of that kind, then current in Western Bibles, into a separate section following the Old Testament under the title Apocrypha. Works so treated usually include 1st and 2nd Esdras, Tobit, Judith, the rest of the book of Esther, the Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, Baruch, the letter of Jeremiah, the editions of the book of Daniel, the Song of the Three Children with the prayer of Azariah, the book of Susanna, Bel and the Dragon, the prayer of Manasseh, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. It says this list of 15 titles, counting the additions to the book of Daniel as 3 separate items, has previously been standard in Protestant editions of the Apocrypha, based on the history of the Canaan and the Western Christianity. One recent edition of the Bible, however, has included the following items among the Apocrypha because of their presence in Greek Orthodox Bibles: 3rd and 4th Maccabees and Psalms 151. And it's a lot more on that, but you get the point. Like, they took books out of the Bible, thus they hidden, another form of prophecy. Because that's part of us being discontinued from our heritage. And they knew that if they left the Apocrypha in there, you could tie in things from the Greek captivity and make more sense of the Old Testament. It's all one piece. It's all one story. Well, not it's like you're not one story. It's all one collection of books with the same theme in every story. Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. This is First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim. Let's see what that is. Chittim is modern day Cyprus. Pretty decent map. It says, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, as we read through the various sources. And Lord willing, I'll get one more. You know, there's a lot of bloodshed. It says, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. Right, so he understood through the prophecies that he was meant to reign for X amount of years from the time he had understanding until he was an adult. He was told that he was a demigod. So he was puffed up and he felt he couldn't be touched. Verse 4, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. Right. He had to start giving up that bread. It says, and after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. Now, real quick, go back to Daniel. Daniel chapter 8, verse 8 says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. So he lost his power, he lost his kingdom. And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Right, is the generals that we mentioned earlier. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. So his kingdom was split up into fours. Go back to First Maccabees. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 5. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and imparted his kingdom among them. So while he was yet alive, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. And his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he had reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. That con. Go back real quick to Daniel 8. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stepped upon them. Yet he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So this is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, like we just read. Going back, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 10, it says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Right. So that vibration of wickedness was being pushed out, you know. But this is all according to prophecy, you know. Back to Daniel 7. Matter of fact, I'll read it in my sword. Daniel 7, chapter 6, it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. Right. So that leopard represents Alexander the Great. The 4 heads is his 4 generals. Verse 7, and I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, it had power. It says, devoured and break in pieces, and it stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So, right, it was diverse because of the Senate, and the emperor, and the military might, of course, but that was given to them by Yahweh Shai. Different technologies and the different war strategies. I forgot the point I was making with that. Go back to Daniel chapter 11 again. Daniel chapter 11, verse 2. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with a great dominion, and do according to his will. So that great king that's going to stand up with no according to his will is Alexander the Great. And then we read in Maccabees, put a name to the prophecy. One more source I like to read, and then I'll be closing out. This is the Biblical World Atlas. This is page 245. It says Alexander's father. Well, I'll read the subsection. As a matter of fact, I'll read all this because to get the meat off the bone. It says for several centuries, Greece and Persia had eyed each other warily across the Aegean Sea, though the separate Greek city-states were often embroiled in civil war. They came together as one when the Persian king Darius I appeared on the shores of the Aegean Sea. They succeeded in rebuffing Darius at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. But the clash between the two cultures continued unabated. Xerxes, son of Darius, tried again and succeeded in sacking Athens in 480 BC, only to be defeated by a superior Greek naval fleet later that year. Several years later, the Persian Artaxerxes I, distracted by an Egyptian uprising, signed the Persian-Greek peace treaty of Callias in 449 BCE, which suspended hostilities but did not end the mutual mistrust. Both Greece and Persia were still contesting economic control of the eastern Mediterranean basin, including the largely Hellenic territory of Asia Minor, which was experiencing explosive growth at the time. Meanwhile, Greece's culture, its architecture, theater, literature, philosophy, and political concepts such as democracy, literally rule of the people, continued to make its way into the Persian realm. There was not a single Persian soldier who could stop it. Judah was no exception. Judah is part of the southern kingdom. Hellenistic culture made its way into Yahoo through Phoenicia. It says Hellenistic culture made its way into Yahoo through Phoenicia, whose cultural and economic influence both stretched along the Mediterranean coast and across much of Galilee. Throughout this region, pottery with Greek-themed decoration began to appear. The themes, often showing semi-clad or nude demigods at sport or in drunken revelry, must have shocked the devout Jews of the region. They remained faithful to the Mosaic edict against graven images and would not have approved of these depictions of the human form. Right, it's proven that there were Israelites around at that time, and some of them, to the best of their abilities, upheld themselves to the law of Moses. Another proof that the Lord is always dealing with a remnant. It says, thus the seed for the inevitable conflict between Judaism and Greek paganism had already been sown well before a young and able warrior named Alexander, son of Philip, appeared on the scene. The city of Athens may have shaped Greek thought and culture, but it would be Alexander who would introduce it to the lands of the Middle East. Alexander the Great. Alexander's father, Philip II of Macedon, 382 to 336 BCE, had wanted to defeat the Persians with the help of a united Greek army. But we read through the precepts that he wouldn't be responsible for taking those nations down. It'll be his son. It says he achieved the first part of this goal when he conquered Greece's divided city-states in 338 BCE. The second half of his dream will not be realized, for an assassin's knife would take Philip's life just 2 years later. After Philip's death in 336 BCE, his 20-year-old son Alexander would become king and ruler of Macedonia. What motivated young Alexander to strive for military glory and fame has never been convincingly articulated. The Greek historian Plutarch, writing in the late 1st century, credits Alexander's divine parentage as the origin of his ambitions. He reports that Alexander's father was not King Philip, but in truth, the Greek supreme god Zeus, and we know that that is a lie. Some scholars believe that Alexander's ambitions were nurtured by his mother, Olympias, a native of Epirus, Epirus, a region located east of Macedonia on the northwestern coast of the Aegean Sea. In a declaration of war against Persia, Alexander took his army of about 40,000 soldiers and crossed the Hellespont in 334 BCE with the help of his flying cavalry, as well as stout phalanxes of Macedonian hoplites and heavy infantry. Alexander dealt a crushing defeat to the army of King Darius III at the Battle of Issus in 333 BCE. Alexander then proceeded to advance deep into the Persian realm, claiming Persian lands and booty for himself or spoils and his troops. One by one, Syria, Phoenicia, Judah, and Egypt were added to the territory of the young Macedonian war. Tyre, Gaza, and later Samaria offered meaningful resistance, but they soon became part of his empire. Then Alexander's army turned to the east, capturing the great Mesopotamian cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. Before reaching the upper Indus River valley, many cities that had been founded by Greek colonists centuries earlier welcomed Alexander as a liberator. As he moved farther east into territories thousands of miles from his home, Alexander remembered to seek and earn the loyalty of the local peoples. He would worship at their local shrines to win them over to his side. The young king Alexander championed Hellenism and founded many cities based on the Greek model. That's about it. So we proved it through the precepts and secular history from 3 different sources. So just to reinforce a couple points, it's important to understand history. It's important to understand the importance and the relevance of prophecy, no matter what time we're in. And the Lord choose our rulers. And with that, I'll end on this last precept. Romans chapter 13, verse 1. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of the heavenly Father. The powers that be are ordained of the Most High. So just like Yahweh Shem Shai chose Alexander the Great at the time, he chose Donald Trump for the previous candidates, for the presidency, and Sleepy Joe, who we rocking with now. But ultimately, we waiting for the kingdom of Yahweh Shem Shai and Elder Apostle Tahar through the Spirit, coined this the year of hastening the coming of our Lord, Yahweh Hamashiach. So, Lord willing, this is edifying. I want to say, call Halayim Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Bachakodash, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahushai, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahushai, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahushai. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone who well teach sound doctrine. Also, the true prophets and the true teachers of Yasharallah, and strong shalom to the hopeful elect. Until next time, I don't want to Liyaska come. Shalom.